Staff.
So, yeah, you probably came in before the.
I want to call to order the September 12th meeting of Building and Grounds Subcommittee and the Committee of the Whole. The first item on the agenda is remembering the renaming of the LBTI Annex. We have quite a contingent from LBTI, so anybody would like to come up and say a few words? Mr. Conlon?
Good evening. My name is Bart Conlon. For those that don't know me, I taught in Lynn for 40 years and was a director at Lynn Tech for the last 5 years that I worked here. And I've had the pleasure of working with Mr. Malagriffa for 28 of those years. And the packet that you have received from us doesn't even tell you how much he really has done for the students at Lynn Tech in all over the years. And a number of us, as some of you might know, he likes to go out to breakfast a lot, and a number of us go out to breakfast with him every once in a while. No matter where you go, we bump into a student. Doesn't matter what year they graduated. It could be from the old trade school even, because he started there at the old trade school. And he knows the co-op job they had, where they're working now, and if they need any help in getting another job, he'll get it. And I think it's in the packet that you received with the 7 reasons. We presented these reasons to the superintendent and to Robin Ellis, representing Mayor McGee, and Mary Jules at a meeting there about a month or two ago. And it just doesn't even tell the whole thing about Mal. And the night of the one of the alumni Hall of Fame meetings, he ended up getting 7 construction jobs that night for kids that an employer that was there being honored. And he's just done so much, and I'm sure anybody else, if they'd like to speak, recommend it highly. And I can't imagine the excitement he will get, because if this passes, we're going to go up, we're going to give him a call and tell him we need to speak to him tonight, and then we'll show up there and let him know. So I appreciate your support, and thank you very, very much.
Anyone else would like to speak?
Hi, my name's Mark Kane. I know a lot of you. Hi, how are you? I am where I am today because of Malagriffa. I'm a business owner in the city. That's it. Simple. The guy's the man.
Mr. Crowley?
Thank you, members of the committee. Paul Crowley, class of 77 electronics. Al Malagriffa was my basketball coach, and I like to tell the story about the time he slapped me in the side of the head because I wasn't using my right hand enough. And today that doesn't fly, I suppose, but I got to say that the guy had a tremendous impact on me and my career. Even though I didn't stay in the field that I chose at Tech, I can tell you that I feel like a big part of my success is attributable to the effort that he gave to me as an individual, but to everybody. It was like that with all the kids there. And as Mr. Conlon was saying, he knows everybody. He knows their name. He knows where they work. He knows how they're doing. And we have a pretty good alumni association. And, raise some good money, give it back to the kids and to the school and so forth. He is the guy behind the scenes that makes it happen every time, whether it's the Hall of Fame dinner or the golf tournament. He's out there rattling people, trying to get them to participate. The man loves Lynn Tech, and he stands behind it 100%. And need I say any more than if you ever seen his car, his license plate is LVTI. I mean, if that doesn't say a lot. And I just want to close by saying that a former superintendent, when we were having trouble at Tech because they were getting ready to close the machine shop, and Malagriffa was not in support of allowing it to decline, and he pushed hard and pushed hard and pushed hard. And I remember the superintendent saying to me at the time, Malagriffa thinks that Lynn Tech is Harvard. And I don't know whether he meant that as a compliment or what, but he does, and he believes in the system, he believes in the kids that go there, and this is like I think the greatest tribute that we could give to him for all the great things he does for Lynn Tech. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quickly, anyone else? Starvin?
Thank you, everyone. My name is Rick Stabbard. I'm the treasurer of the Alumni Association, and I just want to say that, you know, I owe everything I have today to Lynn Tech and the foundation of skills that I got there as a student, and that allowed me to start my business in the trade that I took 36 years ago. And Malagriffa called me constantly to try to get me to come into teaching. And if it wasn't for Mal constantly haunting me, finally he wore me down. I went and spent 14 wonderful years, 14 of the best years of my life, working at Tech, working for Mal, working for Bart, working for Jim Ridley. And I just can't say enough about what Mal has meant to me and what he's meant to Lynn Tech and the Lynn Tech family. So I think this is a great honor, and I think it's well-deserved. Thank you.
I personally think this is, as they say, a slam dunk. I think he deserves the honor, and I think it's very important that you honor someone while they're living. Doesn't do them much good posthumously. And I would entertain a motion to approve this. Take attendance.
Who said the motion?
No
Motion to, all
Well, first we're going to take attendance.
right, we'll take attendance.
Mr. Cassianis.
Present.
Mr. Ford.
Present.
Ms. Gately.
Present.
And observing, Ms. Capola. Observing. And Mr. Nicholson. And Mayor McGee. And Mr. Satterwhite.
Okay, I will re-entertain.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to rename Annex, Tech Annex to the Malagriffa Tech Annex. Is that what they want? Because I think he deserves this more than anybody, and I'm thrilled for him to get it when he's alive and being able to push for it. Because anyone that knows Malagriffa knows that he pushes and pushes and gets things done for Lynn Tech, and I can highly recommend this.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Roll call?
Mr. Cassianis.
Yes.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Ms. Gately.
Yes.
We will now move this to the full committee for a vote in the upcoming meeting.
Committee.
The second item on the agenda is the taking back of Marshall Middle School, which I have found out since we put it on the agenda that we had on 5/17/18, we gave the city 6 months to sell the property and turn it into senior housing. That did not happen within 6 months, so then the building in effect belongs to us now. So there is no need to take any kind of a vote or any action tonight on that matter.
Okay.
And that's it. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Building and Grounds meeting is adjourned.
tonight. It's designed to provide an opportunity for citizens to express their With that, we'll close the open mic session, and we will actually go into the full committee meeting. I'd ask everyone to please stand and join me in a salute to the flag, and also remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I ask all those here standing that you join me in a moment of silence in memory of Joan Amico, a retired teacher who passed away on July 10th of 2019. Thank you. First on the agenda is minutes from previous meetings.
Make a motion to accept the Personnel Subcommittee meeting on Thursday, June 20th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The minutes are accepted.
Make a motion to accept the Personnel Subcommittee meeting on June 27th. Second.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are accepted.
I would like to make a correction on the next one. Members absent, if we could be corrected to be Mayor McGee. And then I'd like to make a motion that the 12th regular meeting of the school committee on Thursday, June 27, 2019, be accepted.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are accepted.
Make a motion in the policy subcommittee meeting of Wednesday, July 31st, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Minutes are accepted.
And I'd like to make another correction on the next one. It's a public hearing on the FY20 budget, Thursday, June 27, 2019. Be corrected first to be Mayor McGee.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are accepted.
And I'd like to make a motion, negotiating subcommittee on August 19, 2019.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are accepted.
And make a motion for negotiating subcommittee executive session on August 19, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And the minutes are accepted. Next on the agenda.
All right, make a motion to take the item out of order to ratify votes taken in the Building and Grounds Subcommittee.
Second.
Second.
This is required a roll call. It's been a motion and second, and we'll do a roll call.
Okay, Mr. Nixon. Mr. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Capola?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Gately?
Yes.
Mr. Nicholson?
Yes.
Mr. Satterwhite?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes. And so we are taking, I'd ask Committee Member Ford, as chair of the Building and Grounds Subcommittee, to take that piece of the agenda up.
I'd like to make a motion to rename one of the buildings of the LBTI, rename the LBTI Annex in honor of Mr. Malagriffa.
Second.
And I would just make a note to that motion that we name it in his full name.
Yes.
I think it's Albert G. Malagriffa. So that's been motioned and second. That requires a roll call. Is there any discussion on that? Roll call is required.
Mr. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Capola?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Gately?
Yes.
Mr. Nicholson?
Yes.
Mr. Satterwhite?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is appointments and elections.
Yep. That is me, and all of you. We've got a grand total of 27 appointments and elections, or appointments actually, this evening. And as I often say, I think in the city of Lynn, we've got in the Lynn Public Schools really great programs, but it's the people that make those programs excellent. And so I appreciate that we're celebrating the appointment of all 27 of the folks on the list. And so July 1st marked my 5th year in the district, and I've attended a lot of school committee meetings, never one with this many appointments. And so I think the way we'll approach this is I will say the appointee's name and their position and where they're working. If you would kindly stand and allow us the opportunity to celebrate you, and then I'll move on to the next name. Sound good? Courtney Tucker, who is the special ed department head at Marshall. Welcome. Timothy Ferrari, who is now the English Language Arts department head at Marshall. Carrie Altieri, the math department head at Marshall. Carrie Nicosia, who is the English Language Arts department head at Breed. Could not join us this evening, but Tim Phelps is now the math department head at Breed. We'll clap in the Kara Cleveland, formerly Constantino, who I did not see, is now the special ed department head at Breed. Tim Serino is the acting math department head at English High. Anthony Canatis is the cluster department head at Lynn Tech. Is Anthony here? David Gagner is the co-op coordinator now at Tech. David. Oh, David, give it up. Adolph Gracial is now the athletic director at Tech, and I assume he's got his hands full at this moment, but we'll give him a hand. Kelsey Dill has been appointed the school psychologist. Antonio Romero as school psychologist. Could not make it. I don't see him. Nancy Cassidy, program specialist at Tracy. Sarah McIsaac, program specialist at Callahan. Oh, I saw Lisa Grassa, program specialist at Ford. Renee Philbrook, who's now program specialist at Pickering. Amanda Campbell, who I did see, assistant director of English Learner Education. Tina Huffnagel is now the assistant director of social emotional learning. Neil Ellis, special education department head at FECTO. Julie Carroll is the acting assistant director of curriculum and instruction for music. Kathy Peroni, program specialist for data and assessment at Tech. Clarabelle Brito, the English ELE assessment specialist. Jennifer Miller, guidance counselor at Discovery Academy at Lynn Tech. I saw Mrs. Moore over there. Anastasia Moore, vice principal at Classical. Saw him also. Charlie Gallo, compliance officer. Annie Feliz, parent liaison for special education. And Don Quietek, who's the payroll accounts payable manager. Congratulations to you all. I'd say most of you were already employed in the Lynn Public Schools, but still, welcome to the family.
Great, congratulations to everyone. Next on the agenda is presentations. And first is on that list is the superintendent's evaluation. Dorothy Presser, I think Dorothy is here, who we all know. Dorothy, welcome.
Thank you.
And again, all of those who've been, all those who've been appointed, you absolutely can stay if you like, but there's, if you have other things to do, preparing for school tomorrow, we're sure that you don't have to stay for the meeting.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
My topics are very often of interest to the school committee, but not many other people.
Thank you.
So good evening. I'm here to talk to you tonight about the next step in the superintendent evaluation to kind of bring you home. The top sheet of this handout is, again, a reminder of the cycle that you've been working on since you began setting goals for Dr. Tutwiler. If you remember, it starts and ends with that self-assessment. You've gone through the analysis, you've gone through the implementation, the formative assessment, and now you're at the summative assessment. So you're getting to the end of this cycle. I think you may have already done some work to start the next cycle, if I remember some of our previous discussions. To get to the end of the first evaluation, you're right at the end of the cycle. A lot of people ask me about what are the different steps in the cycle, how can we set up a calendar for this? So the second sheet, I actually thought I would set up a procedural steps worksheet. You can use it if you want. If it's not useful to you, then don't use it. But it lists the various tasks in the different parts of the evaluation. You'll notice that some of those I know you've already completed. You've already set the goals, you've already approved the goals and indicators. The formative assessment has happened, so now you're below that line in the middle of the page and ready to get to the end of the cycle. So the first part of that is going to be that Superintendent Tutwiler will be presenting his report on progress on his goals and progress on the standards and so forth, and that will give you the evidence that you need to actually complete the evaluation form. And I'm not sure when that'll happen, but at some time, I think, in the near future. Once you have that information from Dr. Tutwiler, then you'll be filling out your individual evaluation forms. What I normally suggest is that you sort of get those forms at the same time that you get that you're getting the report, and then allow yourselves enough time in filling out those individual forms so that if you have any clarifying questions that you want to ask, you can go back to Dr. Tutwiler and ask those questions. But give yourselves a hard date to make sure that it's done so that things don't drag on. Once the individual forms are completed, they go to someone to do a compilation. If you remember us talking about the fact that in the end, the superintendent only has one boss, which is the committee as a whole. So in the end, there has to be one evaluation that's a composite of all the individual evaluations. So one of the decisions that you'll need to make is who does that compilation. The AG's office recommends, but does not require, that if there is someone who's not a committee member who you feel is able to compile that composite, then they can go ahead and do that. So it could be someone like an administrative assistant that you feel would be able to do it. Or it could be a committee member if that's your choice. When you're thinking about the compilation, there are some questions that you'll need to be thinking about. Who's going to do it, obviously? How will the end rating be determined? In the end, hopefully, there's one rating that reflects everybody's opinion on the goals, one rating on the standards, or on each individual goal and on the standards. So sometimes committees will just say, there was X number of proficient, X number of exemplary, X number of needs improvement. Sometimes they try to reach one, the consensus is that it's proficient. So you'll kind of need to make a decision about how that gets presented. There are committees who decide that the only evaluation that's presented is the composite. So sometimes the individual evaluations are shared with everyone on the committee. Sometimes the committee only sees the composite. So you'll need to decide that question as well. In general, I would say that in order to have a good discussion about the evaluation, it's helpful to know what everyone else said. And then once you've also determined how the narrative is, or how the ratings are reached, you also might want to think about how do you approach the narrative in the composite. Is it sort of a compilation of everyone's narrative? Is it picking out comments that were common threads through the narrative, or those kinds of questions? And then once you have the composite compiled, then it is a discussion item and a vote to accept the final evaluation at a public meeting. The superintendent I always say, has the pleasure of being evaluated in public as an employee of a public board. So I can take any questions on that. Otherwise, I can go to the couple of forms that I put in the packet.
Any questions? Member Satterwhite.
I just wanted to thank you for simplifying it on the second page. I think that helps out quite a bit. So the last four items below the line are
Yep.
the ones that are outstanding.
Yes.
But you said that two of these could be done at once.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I would, well, actually, the two that would be done at once is the superintendent providing the review. At the same time, you would take this to start to fill it out.
And it's all right to do the to decide if we're going to do who's going to do the composite, and if the individual is going to be shared with the entire committee beforehand, right?
Oh,
because that seems like
absolutely.
it's going to be
Absolutely.
simple to decide that. Okay.
It's absolutely the best way to decide that is before you fill out the individual evaluations.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay. So I put in the packet the two documents that you'll be using as you're filling out the final evaluation. The first one is the report that you'll be filling out, end of cycle summative evaluation report. A couple of tricks on this, and I didn't go ahead and do it because I'm not exactly as apt as I could be in using Word. But you're going to start actually filling this out on page 3, because the first thing that you're going to fill out is your ratings and your information about the goals. Then you'll fill out the information on the standards that you decided to evaluate the superintendent on. Then you go to the front page, and the front page is kind of a summary page of those back pages. What I would suggest is that someone who is good at Word, because this is a Word document on the DESE website, actually populate what the goals are right there for you so that you have that. And then you have picked certain elements from the standards that you're going to concentrate on. So I would have whoever is doing this either check off the areas where it says focus indicator, check if yes, either check that off or cross out or get rid of everything that you're not talking about to simplify the form and make it a little less daunting to look at as you're doing it. I found that to be very helpful to other committees that are filling it out. When you're doing it, after you've thought about the goals and when you get to the part where you're thinking about the ratings on the standards, you have certain standards that you picked. You picked, for instance, standard 1B3 and 1E3. So you'll go to this document and look at that particular standard. Just pick out 1B3 was diverse learners' needs. So you don't have to look at anything else on that page except 1B3 and the descriptors for that related to unsatisfactory needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. So it might be helpful to just make sure that you highlight or circle or something the only ones that you'll be looking at in the document to make it, sort of spread yourself out on the kitchen table with these and think about everything and put it all together. It's a little bit cumbersome to work with, but once you've done it a time or two, it does get easier and far more streamlined to do. Any questions? You feel ready to go? Okay. Any questions?
Go for it.
Question?
I had a question, but
Yep. Go ahead, Member Nicholson.
we may be asking about the same thing. But there were some changes to that with the at state level regarding the superintendent evaluation process recently.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Yes,
at
I
all?
can. I can. So going forward, the state has introduced a model pilot rubric for the superintendent that only goes down to the indicator level. So if you look at the rubric that you have in front of you, it has the standards, then it has indicators, and then under those indicators, it has elements. The new model eliminates those elements and gives a description of unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, and exemplary only on the indicators. So it gets the school committee a little bit out of the weeds and enables the school committee to be looking more at results instead of process. The way two educators may talk about process, and in a way the school committee thinking about, were the what and the why, not the how. So it keeps the school committee a little bit more on the what and the why, as opposed to sort of asking you to go into the how by the way the rubric is structured. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. There's also some of the things in some new advisory are things that actually reflect more what has been found to be practice in the 5 years since the indicator or since the evaluation model was implemented. So there's much more focus on the fact that this is a goal-focused evaluation as opposed to a focus on the standard, and there's more focus on more emphasis on the fact that you should really be picking focus indicators and not using everything in the standards. So I think that's another helpful tool, helpful advice to enable you to do a more effective evaluation.
Thank you.
Superintendent?
Yeah, I was not going to go there. I was going to go ask if we could agree on a timeline for the remaining, there's 4 action items, but, they can be merged, as Member Satterwhite was suggesting, but I think it would be good this evening to have a sense for deadlines, actions.
When did you expect to have your evaluation or of what you've done so far that we need?
When I'm ready to go when you're ready to go.
It's already prepared.
It is not already prepared, but I will be ready to go when you're ready to go. The only thing I would say is that the student learning goal was tied to MCAS, which we do have data on and are excited about, but it's embargoed until the end of the month. I didn't see the date.
Right now, it's not.
So I think that we should put on the next agenda we need to decide what we're going to do with the composite evaluation, the second part that we talked about, and who's going to do it. Is it going to be shared and whatnot? Because that should be simple to be able to put on the next agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah.
We could.
Member Nicholson, yep.
Yeah. I was going to say that, so that means that your report, we would need to wait until at least October to get, yeah. We could fill in we could do the rest of these now if we wanted to, working backwards from that. But that was when we had talked about this process, we had baked that in that it was going to be in October. Yeah.
Well, I think because she's only on as a presentation, not as an item to vote, I don't think we can do that until next meeting.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
that's
it's up to the Attorney Moore.
It's up to the chairman.
Okay.
I think we could do it tonight, or we could have a couple of weeks and then be ready to do all of the other action, and then maybe look at a date reflecting on when those information. It's just the way I'm looking at it. When that information is available in October, we can, and then we can maybe nail down a date at the next meeting with in mind. I think what Member Satterwhite's talking about, putting together the other pieces.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Member
I
Gately?
agree with that. I think that we should do the, compiling. I would feel very uncomfortable not knowing the results, not knowing how our students did, to evaluate you when so much was like aligned to it. So I would really like to see the results. I would like to see how we did this year, and it would be hard to evaluate without that. It's like not going into a classroom and evaluating somebody. So I would like to do it.
And as a follow-up to that, I think this gives us a couple of weeks to then get ready and put those pieces together at the next meeting, and then we can
Yep.
identify the timeline. I don't know if anyone thinks that's anything differently, but seems that.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the next meeting, we're going to fill in the dates by which we expect to do each of these steps.
Yep.
Right?
And then we can talk about the composite as well,
And the
and who's going to put the
compile.
composite together, compiling it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was confused. I thought we were talking about two different, but yeah, next meeting, we'll have the dates,
I
whatnot.
think that's what, were you
That's
talking
fine.
about something different, and which is fine, happy to.
No, what I had originally offered that, and then Jared said that possibly doing it tonight. So it sounds like we're all in agreement that we should push it off to the next meeting, which is what I
Yeah.
offered. Okay,
that's
just
fine.
just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
And it just, what if someone else wants to come in and talk about, you know what I mean? That's why I'd like for it to be put on the agenda as something that we're going to vote on. That's it. I appreciate it.
Are we, so we're voting on the dates?
What it sounds like is next meeting, we're going to pick the dates and talk about the composition of the evaluation.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Great.
Any other thoughts, questions? Questions
No, if any
on the process or on the presentation tonight?
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Very
And I,
welcome.
and I think if there is any other questions, we can absolutely reach out
I was just
and
gonna
get
say
more
that.
input.
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely,
Okay, and I'm sure you're available to all of us at any time.
absolutely.
Great, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Next on the agenda is update on the strategic plan. Dr. Tutwiler.
So in your packet, there should be an updated strategic plan. Last year, as you all know, one of the 4 district improvement goals was to, quote, engage a diverse group of educators and community stakeholders to develop a multi-year strategic plan, complete with a collaboratively developed vision and district core values. Beginning in October 2018, the leadership team, which was comprised of all principals, directors, assistant directors, and the inclusive planning team, which was comprised of students, teachers, parents, and partners from 20 community agencies and elected officials as well, worked together in parallel fashion to dive deep on what is working well in the district and where we see ourselves in the next 3 to 5 years. Through a visioning exercise, inviting broad input, deep data analysis, and to be frank, really honest conversations about our work with and for students, we've arrived at what I would call substantive community agreements on a path forward. On the top of the document, there's an updated mission and vision for the Lynn Public Schools, and this is stuff that you saw, this first page, I believe was in March of the last school year. These are statements we agree define the work that we're doing and our best thinking around the district and where the district is headed in our work with students. Beneath those statements are a set of core values, if I might say so, and those who know me know that I believe deeply in them. I think this is the anchor of the document: inclusiveness, shared responsibility, collaborative relationships, high expectations, and inspiring lifelong learning. These are the beliefs that drive our actions. With mission, vision, and core values in place, beneath is a set of strategic objectives, and there are 4, on which we will focus over the course of the next 5 years. These are big, big objectives, which is the way it's supposed to be. This is about stretching to meet the needs of students, not about identifying easily achieved objectives. The specificity in the work and each strategic objective is defined in the initiatives, which is on the next page, immediately following. Lastly, there are specific outcomes which we believe will occur as a result of the work. The outcomes are high level at this point. You'll notice that specific quantitative factors are missing. That is intentional. That work will be done in conjunction with the action planning, which is a part of the plan wherein we decide what professional development and/or systems and structures moves we will make tied to each initiative in service of meeting the objective. Action planning is about defining the how, as well as the identified quantitative benchmarks for progress monitoring. This is the mechanism through which we will determine if we're progressing, if it's working. Further, it seemed prudent to wait until the most recent accountability data was released to begin fresh this year. The action planning began this summer and continues as we speak. I want to invite the committee to think of this as a somewhat flexible plan and not etched in concrete. We need the flexibility to shift or reprioritize as the needs arise. Should we confront that scenario, a presentation with rationale will be presented here first. What you can expect this year and in the years to come is detailed updates on the work identified in the plan, data shares as it relates to progress, and portraits of how the work is playing out at the district level, in schools, or in the community. As I made clear in the opening day convocation, this plan is not mine. It is ours. Personally, I think it reflects the right direction, the right foci and initiatives leading to the right outcomes to drive the district in the direction that it needs to go. I believe in this plan, and I support it wholeheartedly. The plan is still in draft form and requires your approval. I wanted to share it with you in updated form and give you ample time to review it, and I plan to put it on the agenda on the 26th with hopes for your approval. But happy to answer any questions you might have.
Member Satterwhite?
Thank you. I appreciate providing us this document and allowing us to review it and really grasp the direction and vision and mission of the district. I was at City Hall when all the teachers were there, and we emphasized the core values, and I think that those are great. As I review this, you think of the most recent thing that took place, and we had two parents here earlier today that had mentioned about our communication and making sure that we're up to date, and to have like a uniformed approach to our district. I think many governmental entities and agencies have a uniform approach to it. I'm a lawyer, so I know when I go to court, there's a uniform small claims rules. They're the same throughout every court. Same thing with the, civil process and procedures, criminal law. It's always going to be the same. So I can emphasize with them, and I can see that in somewhat of a way, you address it with a collaborative relationship. But as I delve deeper into the initiative, it seems more so partner with agencies. You have one where eating habits, culinary responses, there's diverse stakeholders and whatnot. Where can we, this communicate and update the safety and security plans, where can we put something in here that it's simple but better communicate with families? Am I missing something within, they're great, but I think that if we can add something that is directly tied to making sure that we have up-to-date and current information on our websites and communicating with parents.
Sure.
And
So what you reference, I feel, are operational, operations factors, many of which can easily be addressed. Some of which, as I mentioned before, with the updating, which teachers at what school is actually a little challenging, and to have it done by a particular time. But I'd want to say first that I would want to be careful about adding and taking away from this document, because I don't want to dishonor the probably hundreds of hours that went into developing it, and I wouldn't want to willy-nilly add or take something away. But But if you look at strategic objective number 4, which is all around strengthening family and community partnerships, initiative 4.1, partner with community agencies to increase and connect students, connect students and families to the appropriate community and educational supports, and 4.3, develop and implement a system of communication that is unified and accessible to diverse stakeholders. I think
it can
really
fall into those.
Yes.
I can see that. Yeah.
Right. And so already, based on the feedback that I got from the parents that reached out from that school, we had a conversation. There has not been a mandate that all schools uniformly communicate to parents, before the start of school. That has not existed. We've got 25, previously 26 schools that had slight variations in the way that they did it.
Neighborhood schools. That's why they're neighborhood schools.
And so I think first I want to honor the spirit of creativity of our principals to do things that are slightly different than what a colleague might do, but there needs to be a standard, and that has not existed, and we've already talked about implementing that for next year. But in as much as it relates to the plan, there are multiple points in strategic objective number 4 that I think gets at that feedback and what you're asking.
And I just want to thank you for how you went about at least not resolving the issue, but addressing the issue. It was promptly, and I think that from what I've been told, really helped. There were circumstances that put that school in that position, and I'm glad that they were addressed, and at least the parents' voices were heard.
Indeed.
Within the chaoticness of the beginning of the school year. So
they always will be, and there's not a bad time.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Member Gately, then Member Nicholson, then Member Capola.
I was just wondering, Patrick, my nieces went to Sisson, and when they were in Sisson, they found out their classroom assignment in June, before they knew their teacher. I don't know why that stopped. So maybe, Kim, you could address that to me? Like, I don't know what happened that they weren't getting that information in June.
I think different schools doing differently, and also with the influx of students over the course of the summer, it's gotten more difficult to create those classrooms in June.
Okay. All right, because when the child left, they knew where they were going the following year. Just, it wasn't that long ago, maybe like 7 years ago. So.
Sisson's a smaller school, too.
Sisson's smaller.
Superintendent.
If I may, I think that's unique. And having worked in 4 districts, even in districts that are much smaller, it is rare that students knew, either their schedule if they're in secondary schools or who their teachers were in elementary school before they left. Because there's so much that happens over the course of the summer that I would hate to have to go back and say, actually, it's something different.
Yeah.
But there should be a standard approach wherein parents and students can expect to know important information before the start of school.
Member Nicholson?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for leading this process to put together this document, and also thank you to all the 100 people that you mentioned that worked on it. I think it's really exciting for us to have a document like this that we can look to as setting the course for the district. I'm looking forward to reading it more closely, and I'm sure I'll have follow-up questions. I guess one question I had in terms of next steps, you had mentioned next meeting taking a vote on it. There's some blanks in here in terms of particularly on the just flipping through it on the outcome page.
Mm-hmm.
Would we be filling in those blanks prior to voting on it, or would you expect to when would you expect to fill in those blanks?
So, as I was mentioning in the sort of setting the table for this, some of that naturally, and working with Lori Likas who led us through this process, happens through the action planning process. So we have high-level outcomes, and many of them, or some of them, should ring familiar because they look somewhat like the goals that we have for this year. And the thinking was for both the community members and teachers that participated, as well as the administrators, that, these aren't things that we want to these are things that should be a standing feature that we should be looking at in terms of measuring our growth. So next week, you're not going to see anything, or excuse me, in 2 weeks, you're not going to see much different as it relates to the outcomes. But as the action plans are complete, I will come here and share, like, here's how we're planning to approach achieving, strategic objective number 2, and the initiative 2.2. Here's the way that we will progress monitor. Here's the benchmark data that we're going to be looking at to judge whether or not we're moving forward.
Thank you.
Member Capola?
Okay, I think you just answered my question, but, this doesn't really tell us exactly what's going to happen to implement all these. So you're saying in a couple of weeks that will be presented, or no?
No. The action planning is ongoing throughout the 5 years.
Oh, in the 5 years, I
Yeah,
understand
yeah,
that.
yeah,
But for
yeah.
this school year, and we have school year 1920 here, so how will those be addressed to us to let us know?
They will, absolutely. Will you have those on the 26th? No. The action plans for year 1? No.
Okay, when do you think that would happen?
So that started this summer. It is a significant process. If you look at the implementation map and all of the things that are happening in year 1, it's a pretty heavy lift. I suspect by maybe mid-October we'll have those. And if you think about it, we won't even be setting up the district improvement and student learning goals as partners until that month anyway. So I think we're pretty much in line with what typically happens. I should also say that if you read closely a number of the initiatives, some of them are going to sound familiar, and some of them relate to things that we've already been working on relative to attendance, social emotional learning, and so some of them can be put together much more quickly. But I'd say in October is when we'll have action plans for year 1.
Because we had there were things last year, but then they didn't really materialize till after the first of the year. So I'm just hoping that, they're great ideas and great things to do, especially the family things. But have schools started planning things like, the one thing here, engaging the parents, the families.
Right.
So is that like, have schools started working on those kind of plans?
Tied, absolutely, as they would any year. But tied specifically to this strategic plan, that work actually doesn't start until year 2. And I can, if you would like, I can spend more time explaining the thinking behind the implementation map, but I can say briefly relative to the family and community engagement. We really felt like, because it hasn't happened, that the leadership in the district needed to be on the same place in terms of training and understanding as it relates to equity. Before we begin building the family engagement pieces, we needed to develop a lens and a common language around what it means to interact with families, what it means to embracing cultural competence before that work begins. Otherwise, talk about holes, like you start having holes in the process. So the map is not just like, hey, let's do this year and that this year. It's really thoughtful thinking about how do we build, intentionally, philosophy, common language, shared understanding around certain things before we start reaching out and building the next pieces.
And I understand that part, but there's a part in here where probably everybody at the table has, had people call us in regards to the Parent Information Center. And I can't seem to find it, but it sounds like it could work well by, that's where the parents go.
Yeah.
So we want to let them know everything that there is to know about Lynn Public Schools right there at the Parent Information Center. So how long do you think that would be?
So, I guess I think
Help all of us that, hear, the lengths of times and the things that are happening. And
that feels to me more like operations rather than the kind of work that this plan would address. However, I'd say that all of the leadership is, and we've already actually started this, all of the leadership is engaged in that work around developing that equity lens, which would address, like, how are we treating people who look different from us when they come in and come to register their children? How are we working with families for whom English is not their first language? How are we welcoming people, our students and families, into our partnership with them as students and educators? That's the work that we're starting this year. So, what you're talking about feels like more of an outcome, more than like, again, work that specifically, you're going to see in this plan.
Okay, thank you.
Member Castellanos?
First of all, thank you. I was part of this district strategic plan. Also a member for it, and I think a lot of us had a lot of input on this this roadmap. The vision, seen a lot of the work that you guys put into this. Is it's really nice to see that the work that we did in the winter, it just followed up. You could just tell. I could see the brainstorm and teamwork on it. I have just a couple questions with the strategic initiatives. I love the objectives. I love that. I could see there's a lot of thought put into it. But with each objective, each initiative, like 1.1, are we setting up SMART goals? Like, how are we going to look at a 5-year forecast? Or how are we setting up the play-by-play, like, to actually bring it to fruition? Because a plan is a plan, right? It sounds great, but when we need to realistically implement it, what does that step-by-step process look like? As Member Capola mentioned, like, we are in it. Like, there's no, like, we setting up the plan, but when are we're going fast now. So what are we going to do to really set that up?
So part of the once. I think our last meeting was at the end of March 28th, seems to, if I remember correctly, when the group all came together and we sort of, made some real agreements about what the plan would look like. The step after that was a team of educators were trained by Lori Likas, who was our facilitator, on how to lead the process of action planning. And that was the late spring work. Like, how do you do exactly what you just described, which is like, how do we turn this into actionable, like, real, tangible work? And that's the process that I was describing, both in the table setting and with Member Capola. That's the process that's happening right now, the action planning. And for each strategic objective, actually, no, 3. Not the 4th one, because it doesn't start until year 2. The work on the action planning has already started. The meetings started over the summer. So that's happening right now.
And now, have you guys identified the barriers before we actually roll it out? I think once we get into the time frame, what are some of those barriers that we could, as a district, are currently faced with before we roll it out?
So, I mean, in my humble opinion, and I invite the deputies to jump in if they have thoughts, the same barriers that exist every year when you have a set of goals and a targeted initiative. You might lose internet for a couple of months. You might have 6 or 7 snow days that derail your professional development efforts. You might have some people who don't believe in what it is you've decided to work on. And so, I've just always believed you deal with the barriers as they come and you find solutions to them. Relative to this work, I will tell you, there's real excitement amongst the leadership team and amongst as you'll recall, and Mr. Ford and Robin Ennis, who participated. There's real excitement, and all the community partners. There's real excitement about this document and about the work in it. I think I'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who would say, this is not work that we should be doing with our students in the Lynn Public Schools and in partnership with our community partners and parents. It's kind of a hard question to answer. I mean, are we anticipating barriers? I
think about the attendance initiative last year and the increased expectations that came with that. I mean, there was some pushback, absolutely. We put systems in place in September that changed by the end of the school year. I mean, Dr. Tutwiler's highlighting that you have to respond in, you can't anticipate every barrier, and you have to respond to some of the feedback that you get from people who are immersed in the change effort.
And I'd just like to, so on 1.5, to use as an example, provide students opportunities to explore a variety of pathways to college and career choices. That's a pretty big, lofty initiative. We are immersed in it with North Shore Community College, with Salem State. Today we met with, oh my God, what is it called? Year Up.
Year Up.
Which is a program, it's a pathway program for students who either, have a high school diploma and or a GED, but college isn't necessarily the path they're looking for, and they get trained. They're going to focus in on IT, and they get all sorts of supports through North Shore Community College and Year Up, and in 1 year, they go into internships and then end up in a job. There are so many different elements that we're juggling. It's a process. It takes time. If we rush into, all of these different programs and just get them going, something's going to fall apart. So we are immersed in this work, but it's a journey that you have to go, and you have to make adjustments as you go to make sure that we're doing it, doing its justice for our students, that they're getting the best out of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to just quickly, just to build on what Deputy Ruggiero said. There's a lot in here. There's a whole lot, which is why I wouldn't, and I did not. I mean, we spent some time looking at this and digesting it with principals and directors this summer. But really, I would rather go slow to go fast. We're just focusing on the core values. I mean, we and I mentioned that on the first day. There's no way that I would ask a principal, put this up, in your office, or, let's walk your faculty through this. I would rather be very thoughtful, very intentional, and go slow to go fast with this work once you approve it.
Member Satterwhite?
And just to go back to me telling you that this is good work, okay? When when you have people that are unhappy with the way things are, a lot of this addresses the concerns. Do you know what I mean? Well, they don't communicate. I see communicate in this maybe 75% because that's important. Communication is important. But then there's also, my kid can't get into a good college, or my kid can't do that, or learn a skill or whatnot. It addresses all of these major components that an urban district like us have. So it's good to see that. And one of the things that I saw that we were lacking when I decided to run was that we don't communicate with other stakeholders, like the preschools. They know the kids better than we do because we don't have them in our schools yet until they're in kindergarten or pre-K. So, a teacher might have a kid that they think is hyperactive or might have behavioral issues, but if they had some sort of report from the preschool, like, hey, this kid just needs to get to know you and he'll be fine, that's great. And a lot of times that's not how it's done in transitions between elementary schools and middle schools to high schools. So we have to communicate within the district and with other stakeholders in the city. So I like that this is a step forward. And it needs to be done. Otherwise, we're just chasing our tail because we're learning things that people already learned. So I like that you addressed that.
Member Capola?
Just to get back to the Parent Information Center and district, I mean, one of these that you did, I love the wording on it, and to me it looks like a simple thing, and I'd hate to see it delayed too long, but in reading it, it's create a district-level orientation program for all new families upon registration that introduces them to the Lynn Public School mission and values and explains how to navigate the school system in schools. That is, so important. I mean, every family that comes in here, the longer we wait to do that type of an initiative, the more families are not in sync with us, you know, and that's probably what I was trying to express to you. But it's there, and it's great. It doesn't say communicate, but it certainly shouts communication in every way, so.
Please.
Two quick things. First, I can't take credit for that or the document as a whole. This was a collaborative effort with a lot of folks, and I would say that is I'm really excited about. I'm excited about all of them, but that initiative is really important to me. The only thing I would say is if we've not developed that equity lens and built that foundation, this is not going to be as successful as I think it could be. And so you want to build that first and then engage. All right, so now that we have these collective agreements and shared understanding of around equity, around partnership, now let's put that piece together.
And that looks like it's year 2 and 3.
Member Nicholson.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just had a question about the outcomes page. Is that meant to be kind of illustrative? Because they're not matched to initiatives, and I feel like there's some initiatives that don't necessarily have outcomes that show up on the outcomes page.
They're matched to the objectives, not to the initiatives.
Okay. So
the initiatives working. It can be a little confused. So mission, vision, core values, theory of action, strategic objectives. The initiatives work in service of the objectives. The outcomes are like how do we know whether or not we met the objectives? What you talk about in terms of initiatives, we action plan on each initiative and develop specific benchmarks within to determine whether or not we're moving forward on that initiative in service of meeting that objective. Is that confusing?
Okay. So the initiatives will have
will
have their own outcome indicators.
Progress monitoring.
Whatever you call them, but
yes.
yeah. There'll be data to measure.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Right.
Member Gately, then Member Capola.
Dr. Tutwiler, I was just curious if you're going to have the survey again of the faculty
Annually. Absolutely.
and it will be anonymous.
Absolutely. It was last year.
Okay. And staff, it says here in 1.3 in your strategic initiatives that it would be supported. You'll support the staff, a diverse staff, you'll support them on this. So you'll take into consideration what they actually say. Because it's very important that even if it's not a positive, that the teachers feel that they're being listened to and being supported by the upper administration, even if maybe their principals are not supporting them, and the principal needs to know that they need to make some changes so that their school will run smoothly. I just want to make sure that is basically what number 1 is providing, right?
So in my interview, I talked about feedback-rich organizations being the most successful ones, but I can ask either Deputy Ruggiero or Deputy Powers to give you a sense for how they work with principals around their survey data in the schools.
Only because I have to tell you of a instance that happened, and this summer I told people, throughout, I see people all the time, Kim, out in the city, and I told them, you have to answer this honestly because it's feedback for the principal. And they answered honestly, and then when I saw them, like in June, late June, they were like, I will never answer a survey honestly again.
Why?
They were embarrassed.
They were what?
They were embarrassed about how they were treated by the principal. And I just don't want that ever to happen again. I talked to you about it, Dr. Tutwiler, and I just want to make sure that the staff out there in Lynn Public Schools feel freely that they're able to express themselves with their concerns. And the principal needs to know that that's feedback for them, to help them build and make themselves a better principal. And that's what it is. And I wasn't hearing that, so I was very upset. And I talked to Dr. Tutwiler about it.
You did.
Yes.
Mayor.
Superintendent
So
Tutwiler.
part of the process, just quickly, you administer the survey, get the data back. Then it's incumbent upon the principal to share publicly
Yep.
amongst the faculty, like this is what you said about, the extent to which you're supported instructionally, accessibility to the principal, things of that nature, so that they can see as a community, like, okay, like, this is not, feedback that just went into a black hole somewhere.
Okay.
So we asked the principals to come back and share that publicly, and
Absolutely, and it certainly was a critical part of my supervision with all of the principals, that the importance of the response to the survey and how you're going to respond to it, and sharing out all of the information from the survey with the faculty. And then the next step is, how are we as a team going to respond to that? And every one of my schools put action plans in place to respond to that, to respond to the feedback. And for some principals, I mean, that's hard feedback.
Yeah.
That's hard feedback. It's feedback on them. It's feedback on their leadership. And they had to get up and present to their faculty, that information. And I think it was the first time we had done that across all schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry.
I'm just sad to hear. I'm not clear what the dynamic was that teacher felt, because that survey was anonymous.
And we both stressed that it is the negative comments that mean the most, right? You could have 80% that are happy with something, but 20% aren't. And so as an administrator, you need to reflect on that. How am I not meeting that 20%, right? We do the same thing with our families and our students when we take surveys. It's about what's not working that you really need to reflect on. And we stressed that with all of our principals.
I just want to make sure that teachers out there that may be watching will
Absolutely,
get this, because I tried to express that, and they listened to me, and I just was very disappointed.
The whole goal of it was to empower teachers and
Yep.
to hear their voice.
Yes, good. Thank you.
Questions? Member Capola.
No, I guess, Dr. Tutwiler, are you looking for a motion to accept the strategic plan? And I'm just wondering if down the...
No, I think he said he wanted to have it.
Yeah.
Are you going to come back next
The request
time?
was,
Okay,
I think
great,
what...
so we have time to look it over.
The
Okay,
presentation was
excellent.
tonight, and I think that Superintendent Tutwiler, Dr. Tutwiler,
Okay.
wanted to give us 2 weeks to review it, and then I'm sure more questions at the next meeting. Yes, Member
You're
Castellano.
going to send it to us, so when do you think you'll have that finished? Right. So are you going to go back and modify it, or are you going to be, this is what we're going with, this is the final? Okay.
Looks pretty good.
I just wanted to make sure.
the only place where you might see change is the specificity and the outcomes, and then there are no action plans tied to this. As those are developed and sharpened and honed, I'll present them to you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tutwiler. Next on the agenda is new business. We have a number of field trip requests. Do you want to speak?
Yep.
You want to speak to those,
This is the annual outdoor classroom trips for Aborn, Callahan, and Lincoln Thompson, in full support of that learning experience for students.
I make a motion that Aborn Callahan and Lincoln Thompson, motion be made to allow them to attend Camp Cody Outdoor Classroom, October 7th through the 11th, 2019, in Freedom, New Hampshire.
Second.
The second requires a roll call.
Mr. Cassianis?
Yes.
Ms. Capola?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Gailey?
Yes.
Mr. Nicholson?
Yes.
Mr. Satterwhite?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes. Next on the agenda, Dr. Tutwiler?
Yeah, very generous soul has offered Mr. Kennison Callahan, donation in the amount of $2,000, which he'd like to use for student activities and field trips. Request your support of that use of those funds.
Make a motion to allow Mr. Kennison from the Callahan Principal to accept $2,000 from an anonymous donor to be used for student activities and field trips.
Second.
Second and requires a roll call.
Mr. Cassianos?
Yes.
Ms. Capola?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Gately?
Yes.
Mr. Nicholson?
Yes.
Mr. Satterwhite?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes. Next on the agenda, Member Ford, you're on the agenda.
I'm looking at an article right now that said, is vaping a health crisis? And if you've been watching any of the news programs, it's becoming front and center with every station it's on. The CDC has said that there were 6 deaths and 450 cases of lung disease attributed to vaping. It appears to be becoming a national epidemic. I invited Mike Geary, the Director of Health and Phys Ed, to maybe have his input on that, and also to look into the Health and Wellness Committee, looking into some things, maybe even as going as far as vape detectors in the bathrooms.
Sure, as Mr. Ford said, we all know, watching the news, how much of an issue the vaping's become. At certainly not just a Lynn problem; it's a state problem. It's a country problem, and we wanted to take some measures. We have obviously some lessons within our updated health curriculum for our middle school and high school students around vaping. We do some stuff within athletics. We do some parent nights within our parent proms where we kind of update them on the latest trends. In speaking with Mr. Ford this year, where it's even become, the usage has even increased, we discussed a couple of the alternatives. We didn't want to do something, at least my suggestion wasn't to do something knee-jerk right away. What I suggested was Kathy McNulty and myself chair the Health Advisory Committee for the Lynn schools. I know a few of you have sat on that at different times. What I'd like to do is to make that each year we have 2 goals. I'd love to ask the committee if they'd like to make, vaping one of the 2 goals of our committee. Exactly what we'd do, I can't tell you right now. I can tell you there's a lot of good minds that sit on our health advisory committee. There's some folks from City Hall, the community, some folks from LPS. We have some teachers, and recently we've had some LPS students sit on that committee. And my suggestion to Mr. Ford was, let's bring that up as a topic of our committee, and we can discuss it with the group and see what we can do from a preventive measures moving forward, and certainly get some input. I would want to get some suggestions from the principals at their schools and really see what kind of systems that they have in place. In the brief discussions that I've had with them this week, they do have some good systems in place to check the bathrooms periodically throughout the day. So I would want to hear about that before and update the committee on that before we can kind of move forward with it.
Member Gately?
Mike, this is great that this is on here. I have been working with students over at my school, and, we had discussions with the seniors, and, it was getting almost epidemic. They're vaping in the bathrooms, and they don't realize what is going to happen to their lungs or what's going to happen to them because the research hasn't really come to the forefront, but it's starting to come out now. So I really am glad we're jumping on this, and I'm glad Mr. Ford brought it up because this is big. This is like Camel Joe all over again with cigarettes. Only it's vaping, and there's no problem with this vaping. You just the little jewels. I didn't even know what the jewels were when I was trying to, work at a prom or something. You're watching for people's jewels, and you don't know what they are, and they're like little thumb drives that you can just put in your put it anywhere and walk right in, and no one can even detect it. And then you go in the bathroom. So there is a lot to be said about looking into this as a goal for this year. It's huge, and I'm really glad this is coming out. Thank you.
Member Castellanos?
Vaping is something I see every day as a social worker. I get to see young students at all ages vaping. It is an epidemic. I think we need to start to realize that we might need to take steps to stabilize the access to some of these places that they're actually the root of where are they getting these cartridges from. The vape tool itself, it's illegal. First of all, it's illegal. They're not supposed to have these, but obviously we are in this position where this is happening. Also, there's flavors. The aggressive marketing and targeting of these companies, it's definitely not just a state. It is national. It's something that obviously I think staying proactive. And I do support, one of the two goals for that advisory committee to work on those proactive preventive steps, but also just setting up the vehicle, not just for education for students, but for parents. I think sometimes, we don't know what's in the chemicals, like Member Gately said. Like, we're going to start seeing research pointing into some really scary findings. And I just like when, again, going back to tobacco, when the industry, with cigarettes were rolled out, I think there needs to be some larger initiatives through our state legislator. And I think some of that goes back to we need funding. We need funding for these programs. I think the Promise Act, going back to funding, is something that we're going to need to partner up with. Those are definitely big items, but we could start by opening up the communication to the problem. But I think that instead of just talking about it, we need to attack the root. And I think that's the piece that I think when it comes to actually getting the cartridges to kids, those places should be hit with heavy fines. There should be really drastic measures taken by not just the school committee, but our state officials, our councilmen. I definitely see we should be moving forward. I'm glad Member Ford brought this up because I see it day in and day out, and it also leads to the comfort, like the vape itself, it leads to other alternatives. Like obviously there's weed oil. I'm not going to go there, but there's another step to it. So that once you build those habits, it's highly addictive. Nicotine it's double, and again it's going back to it's supposed to be a fun thing to do socially, and we got to disconnect the social piece to it. I think increasing other opportunities for our youth. If they're not getting into the vaping, we got to give them options to do things other than that, to give them a reason, But I appreciate the transparency, being up front, giving us this opportunity to hear what the leadership steps that we can take together to make it. Sorry.
Member Capola, then Member Satterwhite, then Member Ford, and then Member Gately.
Michael, have we updated this and put it on it's illegal? Like cigarettes, the alcohol, what we have in this student handbook. Has that been added into that?
So I can't speak for the handbook. I can speak for the health lessons that we have within our health curriculum, and our teachers, talk about that. We put in a couple of updated lessons, offered through the state last year, and there's a lot of updated information in there. I can't speak exactly for the handbooks, but I can definitely look at it.
Just so that it's in that handbook. Hopefully, some are taking notes over here on that. Okay.
Member Satterwhite.
Thank you. Mike, thank you for coming and speaking to us. I think that all of my fellow school committee members agree that the issue here is the communication. The kids are being communicated through these vaping companies, and they're listening to them. We need to have that counter communication, and it could start in the classroom. My mom started smoking when she was 12 years old, tobacco cigarettes, and now she has lung cancer. So, there's had she not smoked, we wouldn't be here and dealing with the health consequences. So I think that just like when cigarettes came out, they didn't know the impact of it, and finally, with data and whatnot, people were able to see. And then with vaping, they didn't think there were any side effects. They were actually saying, "Oh, stop smoking cigarettes. Try the vaping. It's more safe." Yeah. But then that was proven wrong. So communicate communicate. So if you have two goals, again, I would emphasize the communication, and that's important. And then with that data you give back to us, we are a voice as well that we can communicate back to the city and let them know, and to the state, and we can advocate for changes, because we don't want our students dying. I know the city recently banned flavored vaping. The health department did.
Flavored cigarettes.
Menthol.
Not menthol, but flavored cigarettes is the
And
the
vaping.
tobacco. Well, the vaping is there was a number of pieces, but it was I know it was focused as well on the flavored cigarettes, and I think nationally right now the president's talked about banning the flavored vaping as well.
And again, we're just the school. You know, we can't implement fines like Brian had said, but we can educate and communicate with the students to let them know that living a healthy lifestyle is only better for you in the long run. An unhealthy lifestyle can lead to many obstacles that could be avoided if you just continue to be healthy and taking care of your body. And, you know, peer pressure happens. You know, but again, if we're constantly or effectively communicating with students, hopefully that would be good. And I think that stakes the health department is important. So I appreciate that.
Member Ford, then Member Gately.
Yeah, this is, you know, back in the 70s, we had a major campaign started by the Surgeon General, and we pretty much eradicated smoking. I was surprised to see a statistic that says only 17% of the world smokes. And, you know, we did a great job of eradicating it then, but then this is a better job by the cigarette companies of backdooring us, you know, to get the vaping into the schools, get the kids hooked on it. And now they're saying second-generation vaping is just as dangerous as second-generation smoke. So I think all of us have got a stake in this. And, you know, I've lived by Barry Park for 40 years, and this is the first year I've seen kids go by my house vaping. And because they leave quite a cloud of smoke and or vape. And, you know, it's pretty easy to see, but I've never seen that before.
Member Gately.
Mike, I just wanted to ask you to make sure that I'm on the committee. Like, let me know when the meetings are, and if I can make it, I'll get there. But I would love to be on that this year, make sure.
And as I mentioned, two of the biggest pieces are going to be the teachers and the students getting, especially the student leader input as far as what are the trends that are going on with
Yes.
stuff so that we can use that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is ratification of votes taken in the policy subcommittee.
Thank you. Yeah, so this was a meeting that we had in July. We reviewed the contract with MASC to do the policy manual development that we've discussed at over the course of the last year or so. And it was a subcommittee and a committee of the whole meeting, and we got some input on the contract, and we voted to make those recommendations. And MASC accepted all our changes and has sent us a signed version of the contract, of which we have 4 copies. And so if everyone is in support now, then we can sign that here now and move forward on that project.
People are.
I make a motion.
Want to make it? We have the copies if the committee is so
Yep.
so inclined to approve.
I make a motion to approve the MAS contract to update the school committee policy manual.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call is required.
Mr. Castellanos?
Yes.
Mr. Capola?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Ms. Gately?
Yes.
Mr. Nicholson?
Yes.
Mr. Satterwhite?
Yes.
Mayor McGee?
Yes.
Oh, no, there's copies, yeah.
There you go. And therefore, copies being passed around to be signed.
Yeah.
And with those 4 copies signed, next on the agenda is communication and information. Superintendent.
Yep.
Ratification of votes.
Oh, excuse me. We've already taken that's already was taken on the agenda. So we took that out of order early on, so that's been taken care of. So next on the agenda is communication and information.
All right, so in your packets, there were 2 manuals as well as a list of authorized personnel to ride the Lynn Public Schools school bus. It's sort of a standard annual feature of the first or early school committee meetings. Also in your packets, I think this was sent, emailed. Is my superintendent's report. You'll notice it's in slightly more formal fashion. I'm sharing it with you, and then immediately after the meeting, we'll have it posted on the website in the same space where minutes and agendas are posted for school committee meetings for anyone who would like to read it. I'm pleased to announce that we're off to a solid start for the 1920 school year. We commenced the year in collaborative fashion at City Hall with an educator convocation. The anecdotal feedback around doing so has been positive. While we only have 1 day to get oriented and prepared, it seemed prudent and necessary for us to come together, celebrate who we are, and shove off in the same direction. The opening days for students were fantastic. As is the case most everywhere, in the beginning, there were a few wrinkles that needed to be ironed. We've ironed them, and I think we're poised for smooth sailing. Collectively, along with the deputy superintendents, we've observed arrival at more than a dozen schools. It's no surprise to me how warm and welcoming the school-based teams present to students. Reading, writing, and figuring is a major part of what we do, but nothing trumps the importance of relationships, and that was on full display in the opening. I have a couple of substantive items on which to update you. Breakfast after the bell has been a point of discussion for a few years now. As it happens, there's no legislation to speak of for the current school year, still in bill form. The approved FY20 state budget included the same language as did the FY19 budget relative to serving breakfast after the bell. Nonetheless, we've taken steps to be in compliance with the requirements. We've done so first and foremost because we believe that every student should have an opportunity to start the day with a healthy meal. Also, though there is no legislative mandate, we've made a move toward compliance out of an abundance of caution. Should the recommendation become legislative mandate, we are solidly in compliance. On July 23, 2019, Kevin Richardson called the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education regarding meeting the requirements of the budget language. Mr. Richardson discussed our existing model where some of our elementary school students are offered breakfast prior to the official start of the school day, and any student who is tardy is offered a quote-unquote second chance breakfast. The DESE representative stated that our current model offers both before and after the bell breakfasts, so that is acceptable. This was followed up and confirmed in writing. Accordingly, we are not required to make any adjustments to our existing elementary breakfast program. For informational purposes, I attached a list of our elementary schools and the model we currently use. 8 schools currently utilize the after the bell model, and 10 use the second chance model. In the secondary schools, we will be implementing the second chance model starting this coming Monday. Students who arrive late will be allowed to go to the cafe and receive a breakfast prior to reporting to class. The cafes will remain open longer for breakfast. We will monitor this approach and offer an update at the midpoint of the school year. Space has been a regular feature of discussion at least since I've been here, and probably longer. We have successfully made some moves to alleviate overcrowding in some programs, but meeting the pre-kindergarten demands is a perennial challenge. Clear in the report on the entry plan submitted last June, we really want to make sure that we're partnering to the fullest extent for the benefit of our students and their families. That approach to partnership is beginning to bear fruit. We have an opportunity to access 5 classrooms on the 3rd floor of the YMCA for pre-kindergarten programming. This summer, we visited the site and met with the current site director. We fully analyzed the security elements as well as the instructional fit with the space that is available to us. The 5 classrooms exist on the same floor, are completely secure, and sit empty during the school day. In total, we have determined that this space is both viable and ready, and we intend to proceed. The rental fee for the school year is $9,500. And those who know the history know that that's very cheap.
I thought this was per month.
That's for the year.
Wow.
This will provide immediate relief for 2 pre-K classrooms currently at Lynn Tech, and will give us flexibility to expand over the course of the year, as I expect we will need to. Attached, and this should be a YMCA letterhead document in your packet, is a list of security features at the site for your review, and Orrin has visited the Y to give it his blessing as well. I'm sharing this with you now, but I'd like to take this up more formally with the Buildings and Grounds Subcommittee at our meeting on September 26th. I spoke to Mr. Ford about that as well. As partners working for the benefit of learning and growth of our students, I'm committed to staying in regular communication with you as it relates to the substantive aspects of the work. Communication is a big part of that. Admittedly, I think there's a certain sweet spot for communication that can be elusive at times. There is such a thing as too much, in as much as there is too little. I'm sure that all members are aware of the item article released on August 28th describing a formal complaint facilitated through DESE, as well as other concerns and, in general, the steps that the district is taking to address issues in special education. While I'm certain that the content of the parent concerns ring familiar, it is my hope that the response and plans, particularly as it relates to the FY20 budget, also rung familiar. The rationale offered in this forum, for the staffing additions in special education were identical to the response in the article. I found the article particularly balanced. Kayla? It was both an acknowledgement of areas in need of improvement, but also a substantive effort to address them. I did not deem either one of those elements ones with which the committee was unfamiliar and therefore did not offer a heads up that it was coming. That said, I will be sure to notify the committee in advance of articles of this nature going forward, and will keep you updated on trends as it relates to compliance. Last but certainly not least, I invite all to attend the 6th Annual Walk for Peace, sponsored by Stop the Violence. The walk will commence this Saturday at 4 p.m. at English High School and end at Warren Street Park. This event I see a typo there. This event is important no matter the year, but in particular this year due to recent events at Warren Street Park. It is my sincere hope that the turnout reflects the community's interest in and commitment to peace in Lynn.
Member Nicholson?
I just want to say really quickly, thank you for putting these online. I think they're always very thoughtful and well written and substantively helpful. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put a cleaned up version as I was reading.
I was going to make a motion to correct that.
I knew you. I was waiting for Michael Satterwhite to say something. A clean version will be online.
Member Satterwhite?
Yeah.
And obviously the content of the report is also important. I don't want to overlook what was said about the space and the work that you're doing behind the scenes to try to alleviate that, because we've heard from multiple sources that we're overcrowded, and that's not new. but I think it's new to the capacity that we're at, especially in our high schools. So addressing that's extremely important, and doing so in a fiscal responsible way. It makes it's a no-brainer. $9,500 for a school year for 5 classrooms.
Cheap.
So I appreciate that you continue to do that, and I know that this isn't the fix. I know that this isn't the stop of the search, and keep on going. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I just briefly address the high school piece? On the 26th, our next meeting, there's going to be a presentation by Shannon Gardner around some work that we have already begun, and this is thought work at this point. But some of the outcomes from that work, we believe, will potentially alleviate the overcrowdedness at classical and English.
Thank you.
In particular.
Thank you for that.
Member Gately, then Member Capola.
Dr. Tutwiler and administration, I was very pleased with that opening day. I just felt like you embraced everyone. Every school was there. It might have been an inconvenience for people to move, but at least they were all equal. Everybody was equal. They were all there. You cared about all of them. That was the message you sent out, and I really want to applaud you on that because I thought that came out awesome. It was like without a hitch. I appreciated it. Started my school year off great, so thank you on that.
Thank you.
Member Capola?
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
It's a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned.
Donna, I thought you had an in-depth, like,